Hi and welcome back to the channel. Yep, this time around I'm outdoors because I am doing a comparison between two movies about volcanoes. Both came out in 1997. The first one was Dante's Peak, directed by Roger Donaldson, and the second one was called Volcano. Now, the reason I'm outdoors is I'm actually on Cowie Hill, about 3 kilometers from home, and Cowie Hill is a scoria volcano. Yes, we have them in Australia. This one has been dormant for about 11,000 years, but it's not extinct. It's just laying there waiting to blow up and destroy suburbs around me. By the way, in case you didn't know, there are volcanoes all the way from here in that direction, all the way through to South Australia and Mount Gambier. None of them are active, but none of them are entirely dead. So I'm going to go back to the studio now and talk about which of the two movies, Dante's Peak or Volcano, are the best, and I'll see you there. Welcome back to the Man Cave. Yeah, let's talk about Dante's Peak versus Volcano, because living near a volcano, I thought I've got to do a volcano episode at some stage, so I'm doing it. My childhood was full of movies where at the end of it everything got blown up by volcanoes. There were tons of them. There was Krakatoa east of Java, even though Krakatoa is west of Java. There was The Devil at 4 O'Clock with Spencer Tracy and Frank Sinatra, which is a pretty cool movie. There were any number of giant dinosaur movies. One of the Derek Flint movies ends that way. So there were just a ton of movies where volcanoes blew up, including The Time Machine. There's a bit when he goes into the 1960s and volcanoes cover the time machine in lava. So we've got a history in cinema of action films full of volcanoes. But in 1997, two studios did back-to-back volcano movies. One was more successful than the other because it had a prettier star in it. But the other one I found kind of more interesting. So I've done a compare and contrast by today watching Dante's Peak, directed by Roger Donaldson and starring Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton, and Volcano, directed by Mick Jackson and starring Tommy Lee Jones and Anne Heche. It's a little hard to say one's better than the other because it's an incredibly subjective thing. But I'll tell you what I like about both of them and what I think is a little naff about both of them. And again, spoilers from here on in, okay? Spoilers, spoilers, and spoilers. It starts with Pierce Brosnan and his partner 4 years before the action of the main body of the movie, who are investigating a volcanic eruption, probably in Indonesia, and he's trying to escape from a whole bunch of lava bombs that are bombarding where they are, and a whole bunch of ashes falling on them, and it's muddy and icky and horrible, and his partner gets hit in the head by a lava bomb. So that's the cheerful start of Dante's Peak. But then we get Harry 4 years onwards. Harry's the character played by Pierce Brosnan, where he investigates for the US Geological Survey a place called Dante's Peak. He's a volcanologist and he's a sad little panda because of what happened 4 years ago. He goes there, he meets the town mayor, played by Linda Hamilton, who is juggling 2 children, a cafe, and being mayor of the town as well, and doing a pretty damn good job of it. There's Grant Heslov in there as well. He's now a production partner with George Clooney, and a whole bunch of others. It's a very picturesque town in the Cascade area in Washington State in America, not Washington DC, because that's a whole different kind of volcanic eruption. But so it's a very picturesque place, and there's an enormous mountain in the background that looks like the start of a Paramount Pictures movie, and it's starting to rumble, and we get a whole bunch of little set pieces that indicate this. We get a cute couple skinny dipping and making love in a hot springs, which turns into a hot pot. Get a bunch of other little things. There are birds dying and there are trees dying. Harry starts to notice that something's going wrong and oversteps his authority and announces at a town meeting to the bosses of the town that they need to consider evacuation. His boss, played by Charles Halloran, comes in and tells him no. And he's wrong, of course. So a couple of days pass and Harry gets closer to Linda Hamilton's character, whose name is Rachel. You said looking at it on the screen. And yeah, he has dinner with her family and charms the children, and does all that suave stuff that Pierce Brosnan did 24 years ago. He meets Rachel's mother-in-law, who lives up on the hills and is not particularly nice to Rachel. So that's the setup for Dante's Peak. Volcano does things differently, and it does it in an interesting way. We've got Tommy Lee Jones's character, who runs the emergency services in Los Angeles. He's supposed to be on holiday, just like Harry's supposed to be on holiday in Dante's Peak. And he's actually not. He's got a teenage daughter who lives with him. He used to live in St. Louis, but has moved to Los Angeles. There's an earthquake, and he and his daughter freak out a bit because they're not used to earthquakes. His ex keeps calling him from the Midwest. And we find out that he's really good at emergency management. His offsider is played by Don Cheadle, who wants his job, and is played sort of semi-comic relief. Meanwhile, there's a geologist played by Anne Heche, who's kind of investigating some weird things going on in Los Angeles. 7 underground workers are killed in an accident nobody can explain, and Anne Heche's character and Tommy Lee Jones's character get together to investigate. There's not really a romance aspect to their relationship. They're more like friends who have mutually compatible sets of knowledge, and Tommy Lee Jones's character, being the kind of guy he is, uses the resources he has to solve problems. He's really good at strategic thinking. He's really good at solving problems. So what happens there, of course, is that a volcano erupts in the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. Tommy Lee Jones has to manage that and find a way to stop Los Angeles from going up like a firecracker. Now, the movies take 2 different approaches to the same subject matter in a lot of ways. In Dante's Peak, because it's an isolated community, it's all about alerting everybody and getting everybody out. It's about running away. It's about getting somewhere where the ash isn't falling and the lahar isn't flooding you and the pyroclastic flow isn't going to bake you like a chicken in clay. And that's a reasonable approach when you're in that kind of area. But the other side of things on the Volcano side is that Tommy Lee Jones's character, and I've got to get his name, hang on. Tommy Lee Jones's character, Mike, doesn't have that luxury. He lives in a city with 8 or 10 million people in it. And he's got to try to save them and stop the volcano from destroying the city of Los Angeles and killing a hell of a lot of people. So his approach has to be containment, management, and dealing with the problem. It isn't about running away from the problem. It is finding a way in an incredibly tight urban environment to handle an out-of-control natural phenomenon. And that, for me, makes it a lot more interesting, because he has to do things like handle the lava. He has to first find out what's going wrong, and Anne Heche's character helps him with that, being a geologist. He then has to convince the authorities, who kind of believe him fairly quickly because shit's going down. And then he has to find a way of managing it. He gets concrete barriers to block the flow, and then arranges for water bombing and fire hoses to harden the lava and kind of constrict the flow in one way, not realizing that the lava is actually using the subway tunnels to flow to another location where it's going to erupt above ground and cause all sorts of havoc. So he has to deal with that. So the 2 movies are very different. One is about a very small number of people dealing with a problem, but in Volcano you've got the whole city of Los Angeles. You've got people of color living in a nearby neighborhood who can't get the fire brigade to help them out because they're busy looking after the museums up the hill. So you've got that kind of Rodney King vibe about it, which has an interesting resolution to it. And so you've got a lot of social issues that kind of fold into that in ways that don't really detract from the story, but actually give you a larger range of characters to barrack for. And Volcano resonates better with a modern audience because, in a sense, the whole narrative is about first responders. It's about the fire brigade, it's about emergency services, it's about the people who are on the spot when things get nasty and how they deal with it. There's also a subplot with a doctor who is very dedicated to her job, and her husband who builds large buildings and has built one on Wilshire Boulevard. and how their dynamic goes. He's a very selfish person. She believes in helping others because she's obviously a doctor. She has taken the Hippocratic Oath and is dedicated to that. And there's a little brief subplot there of the tension in their relationship and how that plays out. There's also the plot with Tommy Lee Jones's daughter, who is sent to hospital after getting a burn, and he has to not only consider the whole city but also look after his daughter when events threaten her again. In a weird way, Volcano is a little more socialist. It's about the collective good. It's about the people at the grassroots doing what they need to do to save the city. And that kind of, for me, plays better into our current concerns and our current worries. A lot better than some very, very beautiful people running away from pyroclastic flow in a pickup truck. It's got more depth to it in some ways. Now, yeah, Dante's Peak is a good adventure film. There's no taking away from it. But I think Volcano, because it de-emphasizes the characters and the character relationships and emphasizes that management approach to emergencies, is a more interesting movie in a lot of ways. Now, there are a couple of things that define a disaster movie, and one of which is heroic individual moments. And each of these two movies has a pretty good one. They've got the one when the lake turns to acid and the party is trying to get across the lake in a boat in Dante's Peak, and the grandmother sacrifices herself for the family. That's a nice hero moment, and it works really well. And Elizabeth Hoffman, who plays the character, does it really well. The only problem is that she's an unlikable character for most of the rest of the movie. So the grandmother we don't identify with. So when we get to the point of her sacrifice, we really care a little less than we should, in a sense. And that's a little bit of a shame. I think a little bit of a rewrite might have helped that. On the other hand, we have a brilliant hero moment in Volcano. One of my favourite hero moments in a disaster movie ever, where John Carroll Lynch, playing the guy managing the subways, has to carry a subway train driver through a subway carriage while the lava's flowing under it and rescue him. And that is one of the great hero moments in a disaster movie. He's a kind of unlikable character before that. He takes nicotine patches, but he's got a sense of humour, and his people like him. We see him in relation with a whole bunch of other people, and he becomes a kind of likeable curmudgeon character, and then does this incredible heroic thing, rescuing the train driver, which I really liked. I think it's, even though the special effects are a little bit ropey, there is a lot more computer generated effects in this movie than there is in Dante's Peak, where they rely a lot on physical effects. But that moment really works for me really, really well. And then we've got Don Cheadle being the comic relief, so it gives Volcano just that little bit of a lighter tone than Dante's Peak had, which is a movie, it takes itself very, very seriously in a lot of ways. And both of them have that peculiarly American thing where dogs are threatened by disaster. In Dante's Peak, it's the kid's dog who somehow jumps through flows of lava and ends up on a rock and then jumps into the back of their pickup truck to be rescued, which is kind of a little bit cliched and a little bit sentimental in a sense. But there's another bit in Volcano where, in the black neighbourhood that's being affected by the lava that flows and the fires that are caused by it, there's a woman looking for a dog, and her dog's trapped in her house. And we see the dog barking at the lava and getting its bone away from the lava and things like that. And we think somebody's going to come in and rescue the dog, but no, the dog jumps out of its pet door and runs away itself. And that kind of works nicely. It's not a sentimental moment, but it's a little kind of moment of humour where the dog's kind of tried to bark the lava away and then run away. So that, for me, is a better moment than the sentimental dog on a rock that we get in Dante's Peak. Then that, of course, brings us to the payoffs. Now, the payoff in Dante's Peak is pretty good. The effects of the volcano, the mountain basically blowing its top and throwing crap everywhere and having a pyroclastic flow of superheated gases flowing down into the town, is done really well. I really like that bit. what you go to the movie to see is that kind of explosion and the disaster caused. There's something that dates back at least till Irwin Allen, if not Atlantis, the Lost Continent, and probably going further, Deluge in the 1930s. We go to these kind of movies to see stuff get messed up. But in Volcano, because they use a little bit more CG, the payoff of the enormous explosion and the way that the city services manage that is a lot less spectacular, though there are some really nice shots of lava flows going down stormwater drains and flowing out to the sea, and that kind of gives you that satisfying shot. And it ends on that grace note of a helicopter shot looking over Los Angeles. In the foreground you've got the lava flowing into the sea, and in the background you've got a brand new mountain called Mount Wilshire in the middle of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles has to find a way to live with having an active volcano in the middle of it. And that kind of tilts things for me. I like that idea of that brief shot of Los Angeles with an active volcano in the middle of it. It's not done particularly well by modern standards, but the fact that they did it at all really works for me. I like that part. So just to wrap things up, both movies have their virtues. In fact, I'll put up a photo here because yesterday when I was in a charity shop, I saw a Laserdisc version of Dante's Peak for sale at about $20, which was over my budget, and I don't have a Laserdisc player. But it shows that the movie is still out there, and at the time, before DVDs were a thing, it did come out on Laserdisc. So that was kind of interesting. But for me, I kind of like Volcano a little bit more. I think that because it emphasizes the group action and the way the first responders are so very, very important in emergencies, and doing it in an intelligent way, makes it work for me. Yes, it de-emphasizes the characters and the relationships and things like that, and a lot of people have criticized it for that. But for me, that's a strength. There are moments in Volcano which are a little more documentary feeling than anything you see in Dante's Peak, even though Dante's Peak does the large-scale grandeur of things a lot better. I think that that's kind of social conscience that we find in a movie like Volcano really tips it in its favor as far as I'm concerned. Other people may disagree, and I'll honor the fact that you do. But let me know which you prefer, Dante's Peak or Volcano, or whether you don't have a preference at all. But I think they're both interesting movies from a certain time, and it's very interesting to see how there's a convergent thing where the same kind of movie is made independently by two different studios at the same time. Dante's Peak cost more and made more money than Volcano did, but I like the way Volcano did what it did. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. You can support the channel if you like at patreon.com/paleocinema. You can also support it by giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Let me know whether you want me to do more back-to-back movie comparisons and which ones you'd like me to do as well. It'd be interesting to see what people think I should compare and contrast. So anyway, as always, watch good movies, watch disaster movies, watch bad movies. Look after yourselves, follow the science, wear the mask over your nose, and I'll catch you next time.